So yeah, thank you for having me to do this presentation. I will start by just brief introduction to what Nordens Ark is. So we are located on the west coast of Sweden, 1.5 hours north of Gothenburg. Nordens Ark is a private, non-profit foundation that works to ensure endangered animals have a future. And we rely on entrance fees from people visiting the park and by donations from both private and large companies, and as well as funds. We strive to strengthen populations of at-risk species by releasing individuals into the wild and by improving the habitats in which they live in. In Sweden, Nordens Ark has a national responsibility for breeding and releasing, among others, lesser white-fronted goose and green toad, and several beetle species. To increase public awareness of the importance of biological diversity, both by we are engaging our visitors at the park and by spreading the information through various news channels and social media. So that's just a brief information about what we at Nordens Ark is. So we'll start off with the introduction to the species. It's the European green toad. It's a true bufo species. And all the conservation work are outlined in the species action plan, which is set up by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. And this runs for 5 years at a time. The latest update came in 2011. And as you see, it has run for 5 years, but this has been approved to run for an additional 5 years. So we're still on that one, 2011 and 2016. So studies from 2001 and 2006 suggest that the Swedish, Danish, and northeastern Germany populations, based on genetic research, should be moved from the Viridis group to the Bephotes variabilis, which otherwise has an Eastern European distribution, as you can see on the next slide here. This makes them, these population, isolated historic remnant from what they used to be. So the Swedish locales are located in coastal areas in the southern parts of Sweden. Historically, the species also inhabited inland locales as well. It is uncertain at what time the species migrated into Sweden. Most likely it happened some 9,000 to 4,000 years ago. It is highly unlikely that the toads migrated from the Baltic countries in the east, but more probable is that they came from Denmark or possibly Germany or via the Danish island Bornholm, as you can see. The toads was historically found in more than 100 locales in Sweden, and was considered a relative common species in coastal areas around Sweden's southern coastline, stretching from northwestern Skåne to the Baltic island of Gotland in the east. The species has declined throughout much of the 20th century, especially during the later half. Reasons for decline is most likely a combination of many factors and probably differs depending on the affected locale. However, there are some causes that are more probable. for instance, eutrophication, causing overgrowth in both the terrestrial and the aquatic habitats and blocking out the sun, which in turn shifts the habitat from a sun-exposed and dry environment to a shady and moist. These types of environments are more favored by other more common species of amphibians, such as the common toad, bufo, and the great crested newt, Citrus cristatus. And both of these species compete and predates on green toads in different stages of life. Other reasons for decline is the lowering of groundwater and the draining of wetlands, causing ponds to dry out earlier than they would naturally. Also, reduced pasture on shore meadows could mean less suitable habitats for adult toads during the summer months. During the 21st century, much thanks to the work that is being carried out, we now slowly see an increase in the Swedish population. From estimated 600 adult breeding toads in 2010 to around 1,600 in 2015. And during the latest national red list assessment, the species was downlisted from critically endangered to vulnerable. However, many of these toads are a direct effect of the emergence of a previously unknown population in a harbor development area in Malmö. And much work still needs to be done since the populations are severely fragmented and toads can't naturally move between the different locales. We might now face a new threat to the continued conservation of green toad, as the presence of chytrid fungus in all but one population has been confirmed. So far, no sick or dead green toads have been observed, and it is believed that the toads acts as a vector for the fungus and spreading it to other amphibian communities without being affected themselves. As with many species of frogs and toads, the European green toad is sexually dimorphic, with females being slightly larger at 80 to 95 millimeters, and males often between 55 and 75 millimeters. Males also have clearly visible nuptial pads on the inside of their thumbs, these harden during breeding season and gives the male better grip during amplexus. Eggs are deposited on in shallow water between 2 to 10 centimeters and are wrapped around vegetation or stones in long strings with eggs positioned in a zigzag pattern. The eggs are small, 1 to 1.5 millimeters, and a fully grown female can lay up to 18,000 eggs. Once hatched, the tadpoles are black and 3 to 6 millimeters in length. Fully grown tadpoles are no longer than 50 millimeters before metamorphosis. As the tadpoles grow, they start to develop a more brownish color, and some even start to show signs of the green speckled pattern they have as toads. Tadpoles have a varied diet that consists of most things found in the water, from algae to dead insects, and also weak or dead conspecifics are consumed. Newly metamorphed toads are between 10 to 20 millimeters in length. Before the tail is fully absorbed, they stay close to the water's edge and often hide under rocks. After a few days, they start to venture out to hunt and become more solitary. At around 30 millimeters, the color and pattern start to show more, and each toad has an individually distinct pattern on the back of their heads and backside. The toad's diet consists of insects, mostly ants and beetles, less often snails and earthworms. Studies on their stomach content conducted in Poland and Romania show that most frequently found insects was from the orders Coleoptera, Hemiptera, and Hymenoptera. Toads brumate during the winter months, which is around October until March, in a frost-free environment on land. They are known to use rodent burrows and sand embankments. Males start to move towards the breeding ponds as soon as they are active again in spring, around April, May. Females often follows a few days later. The males hold small territories along the water's edge where they call for the females with a trilling call. Once a female arrives, the male clasps the female in an axillary amplexus. Egg laying and fertilization often commence during the night in the shallow water when water temperature is over 12 degrees Celsius. Egg mortality is low. However, the mortality rate for tadpoles until metamorphose is higher. The time it takes from eggs to toads going on land depends a lot on the water temperature. At 24 degrees Celsius, it takes 45 days, and at 18 degrees Celsius, it takes 60 days. Tadpoles rarely go any deeper than 20 centimeters and are often seen grazing directly under the surface. Tadpoles start to metamorphose at the end of July and early August. A large portion of toads will not survive their first year, and estimates from one locale in Sweden suggest that only 0.02% of the eggs produce an adult breeding female, whilst 0.04% produce males. Male toads are, under normal circumstances, sexually mature after their third brumation, and females after their fourth. As soon as the toddlets are on land, many start to move away from the ponds in search of new suitable habitats and hunting grounds. To find toads more than 1 kilometer away from the nearest pond the first season is not unreasonable. The following year, some toads continue their dispersal while others stay. As adult breeding toads, studies show that they are extremely domicile faithful to their breeding pond and probably also the feeding area and brumation sites. Toads move long distances between wintering locations, breeding ponds, and summer feeding grounds. It is not uncommon for toads to move 2 to 5 kilometers during one season. Adult toads are most active after sunset and stay in open biotopes during the summer. During the day, they often shelter in burrows, under rocks and vegetation, or partially burrowed in the ground, only exposing their backside. Since the toads inhabits coastal habitats, they also evolved a tolerance to salt water, with adults tolerating salinity up to 2% and tadpoles between 0.5 to 0.8. Dispersal in this way is most likely the case with the population that was found in the harbor development area in Malmö in 2013. And this population is by now the largest population if you're counting adult breeding toads. It is thought that these toads migrated from a nearby island between Denmark and Sweden. This dispersal might also be the cause to the colonization of the islands in the archipelago in Blekinge County at the southern tip of Sweden. The Swedish populations are found in various summer dry and sunny environments, such as hard grazed meadows, bare rocky shores with small rock pools, in sparsely vegetated limestone quarries and gravel pits with a step-like character on shallow water bodies. Characteristics of a breeding ponds is that they are stagnant, shallow and vegetation poor, and in a sunlit place, and often with a mineralogenetic bottom material, and is salt affected or located in a calcareous environment. These type of ponds are also subject to big changes in water temperatures, and many of them dry out regularly. All of the work dedicated to the green toad conservation at Nordens Ark is facilitated in a biosecure building, isolated from all other amphibians in our collection, to ensure no disease or pathogens is transferred to the toads. Each spring, around April and May, we have collected eggs from the larger viable populations in southern Sweden. We collect small amounts of eggs, approximately 500 to 900 eggs from up to 10 egg strings. These are individually transported in buckets with small amount of water. At arrival, the eggs are acclimated to the new water before being put into the aquariums. The aquariums holds 140 liters and are connected to a large plastic container holding an additional 60 liters of water. This is where all the filtration takes place. The filtration starts with the water flowing over a corner section of the aquarium through a filter mat and down into the plastic container with filter media designed to promote bacterial growth. Oxygen-rich water is necessary for the beneficial bacteria to thrive, and the filter must be working constantly. As the green toad tadpoles seem to prefer slow water circulation with a high oxygen content, this method works very well. With biological filtration, it's the bacteria that breaks down the harmful substances, ammonia and nitrate, into the more harmless nitrate. To ensure this is already underway when the eggs arrive, small amounts of ammonium chloride is added to each aquarium 2 months prior. This starts a bacterial culture, which will then ensure the water is clean when the eggs hatch and the young begin eating. To keep nitrate down on non-harmful levels, the water is changed weekly. The amount changed is determined by daily water samples. The egg strings are placed in small net baskets that are hung on the edge of the filtration section in the aquarium. This way, the eggs and fry are closer to the surface and oxygen-rich water can circulate freely around them. The egg strings are placed on small pieces of netting to further maximize oxygenation. After 2 weeks, the young have grown sufficiently to be moved into the larger aquarium. At water temperatures around 20 to 21 degrees Celsius, the tadpoles will metamorphose after 40 to 50 days. Lower temperatures around 17 degrees will prolong the metamorphosis to about 90 days. Higher temperatures also affect the metabolism of the tadpoles, which also shows on the water quality. Tadpoles are quite tolerant to high nitrogen levels in the water, except ammonia. It is therefore important to test the water frequently and to adjust the amount of water changes accordingly. All aquariums are illuminated by twin T5 light, One strip light is pure visible light, and one is with low output UVB. All light is kept on during 10 to 12 hours during the aquatic period. Tadpoles are fed a variety of food items, for example, turtle pellets. Also used is algae wafers, normally used for freshwater fish. Food items high in protein seems to be important for the development. As soon as the tadpoles start to climb on land, they are moved to large plastic boxes lined with damp dishcloths. This prevents them from dehydrating, as they are very vulnerable the first few days. Small toads are housed indoors in large plastic containers with heating lamps and UVB strip light. As the individual toads grow, they are moved to same-size groups. Once the toads are larger, they are moved outside to large outdoor pens with predator-safe lids. Here they are exposed to natural weather conditions and temperatures. Based on studies, we try to offer the toads a beetle-based diet with such species as bean weevils and lesser mealworm beetles, but also crickets and mealworms are included. So brumation is triggered by the day length and lower temperature. To acclimate the toads indoors, the day length is shortened and all the extra heating is turned off. And 2 weeks prior to brumation, they are fed one last time. Depending on the age and size of the toads, they brumate for 1 to 5 months at around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. Adults seems to need a longer brumation to breed. So the breeding group that we have, they brumate for 5 months. Toads are moved straight from the brumation fridge to the greenhouse, and after heating up, the males start calling. Males compete for the females, so it seems that the best mix is 2 to 3 males per female. The pool is designed with a large shallow part with a depth of 10 centimeters and the deeper end about 20 centimeters. The whole greenhouse is placed in a sun-exposed location with early morning sun. To maximize spawning sites, throughout the pond, twigs and branches is placed along the sides and resting on rocks in the pond. Tadpoles were kept in the pond to feed, and they seem to do a lot better freely in the pond than they did indoors. To this day, Nordens Ark has released some 18,000 toads to Öland, with 7,000 released at the first location, and the rest once the reintroduction program started again in 2009. All releases from Nordens Ark have been to places they once existed and that have been restored for green toads. Suitable sites are determined by the county administrative board along with the proposed actions in the species action plan. It is also the county administrative board that is responsible for the continued maintenance of the sites along with landowners. It is also advised that no toads reared in captivity is to be used as supplementation to existing natural populations. Toads and tadpoles are tested for chytrid fungus and ranavirus before transport and release. As there are so many toads released, not every single toad is tested, but we take communal swabs from randomly selected toads. A photograph of the backside and head is an easy and non-invasive method that is being used to identify animals released. In this way, it is also possible to see if new toads emerge, possibly from reproduction. Toads are preferably packed the day before transport in plastic boxes with moist sphagnum moss. The boxes are then placed in a fridge set on approximately 10 degrees Celsius. This keeps the toads calm. Tadpoles have only been transported once, and they were netted from the pond on the same day as transport and put in buckets with tight-fitting lids. The water circulated using battery-driven air pumps, and half of the water was changed in the bucket before transportation. Release of both of newly metamorphs and subadults in late autumn at probable wintering areas. It is thought that releasing toads at this time of year will make the toads hibernate in close proximity to release site and breeding ponds instead of wandering away. This might be a good way of releasing adult toads ready for breeding the following spring. The release of yearling toads have been done both in late autumn, in September and October, and in late summer, July and August. Which way is better is not known, but it might be a better option to release them late summer, as there are still insects available for them to eat and gives them time to find suitable wintering areas. Tadpoles have only been released once so far. That took place at the end of May. This could be a good time to release tadpoles, especially if they have grown large in artificial pond and can outcompete other amphibian larvae at release site. Bird ringers contracted by the county administration in Kalmar are to do surveys in Ottenby on the southern tip of Öland and to compare findings with photos taken at Nordens Ark prior to release. So you see the picture on the left side is taken here in Nordens Ark prior to release. The one in the middle is after hibernation in the wild, and the one on the right is the same individual later that summer. So some individuals are found multiple times during the season and are providing valuable information. But it has shown to be a difficult species to survey as they are active at night and males only call on warm and calm nights between April and June. To make it even more difficult, green toad habitats on Öland are located in bird sanctuaries and human activities are prohibited during much of the green toad's breeding season. One option is to take water samples for environmental DNA surveys. This, however, only shows if toads have visited the water and at what density. Also, many waters are brackish and DNA deteriorates quicker in saline water. So the first site that toads were released from Nordens Ark to Öland was a place called Kungsgård. So toads were released at Kungsgård on the northwestern coast of Öland between 2003 and 2006. But this site was declared unsuitable for further actions due to the large number of predators, such as grass snakes, great-crested newts, smooth newts, and freshwater crayfish. During surveys in 2009, one adult male toad was recorded persisting in this locale. Also, surveys in 2017, there was a confirmed male calling at the same site. However, no eggs or juvenile toads have been observed. Since the first release in Ottenby in 2009, there have been sightings and toad calls with as many as 10 males calling. However, during the last seasons, only 1 or 2 males have been recorded, and it seems as though the population is starting to decrease. Reasons for this could be because of the small number of toads released in the first 7 years was not enough to start and sustain a new population. The last 3 years, Nordens Ark has been able to rear and release more toads each year than the first 7 years combined. But we will not see the results of these releases for another 1 to 2 years, as they are not sexually mature yet. But this is after the first release in 2009. So in 2010, they had the first male calling. And also late summer, they had a confirmed first sighting of the newly metamorphed. So the toads released in 2009 did reproduce the following year. With the release on northeastern Öland in Högbyhamn, there has not been any sightings or toads calling recorded since the release program started in 2012. This year, extensive surveys was conducted with personnel from Nordens Ark present during 1 week in late May. During this period, we found 1 toad, probably from previous year's releases, and also confirmed toad calls during few evenings in May and in June. New for this year was that we, as a trial, have tried to document one of the sites on Öland, Högbyhamn Bird Sanctuary. This spring, before the breeding season for toads started, we placed 17 data loggers, both on land and in ponds, and at 2 depths per pond. Also, samples for eDNA was collected along with nightly inventories during breeding season, and observations could possibly give us some valuable information on preferred habitats. Besides this, we also used a drone to take aerial photos of ponds and adjacent land habitats to get a better view of plant cover, etc. So this is one of the ponds where we released the tadpoles. And these are the buoys for temperature loggers in the water. A good habitat for green toads should include a number of breeding ponds with mineralized substrate, for example, sand, rock, or limestone, in close proximity to each other and placed in a sun-exposed environment with low or no vegetation. Ponds should be shallow with a slow slope down to provide males with good calling sites and for females to lay their eggs. These types of ponds are often the subject of drying out, which both poses a negative and a positive effect on the suitability for green toads, as this can eliminate the presence of certain predators, as well as killing both eggs and tadpoles. So this is one of the ponds in last year. So last year we had a really hot summer with a really dry summer in all of Sweden. You might have heard about that. It was the case for most of Europe as well. Terrestrial habitats should be dry and well drained with open sandy patches, and suitable daytime hides must be present. Wintering areas should be present within 1 kilometer of a diameter from the summer feeding habitat. Such places has been built, for instances, in Ottenby. So this is an old cellar in Ottenby. They did some renovations, so they decided to include, to make it more toad friendly. Green toads are a protected species, and it is therefore illegal to kill, disturb, collect, or destroy both the toads, tadpoles, eggs, and their habitat in Sweden. It is also protected under the Habitats Directive, Annex 6, and in the Berne Convention, Appendix 2. So is much of habitats where green toads inhabits. Habitat inventories for an area should include assessment of suitable breeding ponds and their size, their risk of drying out, and water quality. Proximity to potential feeding grounds and the presence of daytime and wintering sites. Vegetation occurrence in and around breeding ponds and risk assessment for overgrowth. Climate, temperature and rainfall, wind conditions, etc. that could have a negative effect on the breeding. The presence of predators and competing species in both aquatic and terrestrial habitats. So the picture here you see with the grass snakes. The grass snake was, one year they had 2 calling males of green toads in Öland. And one night there was only 1 calling male, so they went out and found this grass snake that had killed one of 2 males. So that poses a great risk when you have a small and fragile population. Biotope types and distribution within various large distances from the breeding area, degree of isolation and possible dispersal. So how well they can disperse from this area. The traffic situation, proximity to roads, traffic volume, etc., and recreational areas and urban development. An important starting point in the planning of restoration measures, as well as the continuous management of habitat, is a holistic view where the goal is to create base habitats with large viable populations. From there, the toads can spread and form functioning systems of meta-populations. What they have done on Öland is restoring coastal habitats along the eastern shoreline, with the goal of having suitable habitat stretching from the south of the island all the way up to the north by constructing ponds and restoring terrestrial habitats. This also has a positive effect on, for example, wading birds. There are also advantages of isolated large populations on islands and quarries with the reduced risk of disease transmission, and it's also easier to check for predators and competitors, etc. In addition to the work of improving existing and restoring older habitats for the species, there is also a need to find new locations to create new populations. Suitable environments are quarries, gravel pits, barren islands, coastal pastures that may be relevant. It is of importance that all interested parties are involved and agree, and that it is knowledgeable staff who plan and execute measures. On Öland, much of the land is owned and used by many local farmers, and it is important to engage them and for them to understand why it is so important to restore these types of habitats. The advantage of introducing the species to a whole newly created area is that pressure from predators and competitors are initially low. Specifying definitive action is difficult as each locale has its own conditions. However, the main rule is that the larger the area with suitable habitat, the better. For the breeding area itself, it is better to have more ponds than one large. The amount of suitable feeding areas for the tadpoles and newly metamorphs has a decisive effect on how large a population within a locale can get. If reproductive summer and wintering habitats are separated, it is important to consider the design of the trails and how possible obstacles and threats, for example, traffic, is minimized. To maintain existing, restored, and newly created habitats for the species requires regular recurring maintenance efforts, such as grass removing and irregular reoccurring actions, such as the removal of higher vegetation. Care measures can be regular inspection and inventories of the site's habitat and of predators and competing species. To raise a sufficiently large and competitive population of green toads in an area, it may be necessary to decimate the number of predators and competitors. This can be done by making the habitat unfavorable to these species, but also to protect eggs and tadpoles, for example, cages. So these type of plastic boxes have been very efficient to protect. So it's basically in situ head starting of eggs. So once they have hatched and the tadpoles are free swimmers, they are released into the ponds again in a similar way as we do in the aquariums at Nordens Ark. Removal of high and dense vegetation along the water's edge in breeding ponds, and maintenance of open land habitat with very low and preferably barren field through grazing and mowing or harrowing. So the best maintenance we can get for green toads is cows and other grazing animals. This makes the work a lot more easier if they do it naturally. So that's pretty much it.